Hello, Jeff here. Just one more time, I wanted to please ask you to vote for Storied San Francisco for Best Podcast in 48 Hills Best of the Bay Readers Poll. The poll is up through August 5th. If you go to 48hills.org/Best of the Bay, you'll see many other categories, including Best Podcast. It's really fun, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you.
So if I make a ube loaf, it says anyone who identifies with this, that they're inherently worth more because I care enough to make something that represents and shines light on something that I think is beautiful.
That was Azikiwee Anderson, founder of Rize Bakery. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city unlike any other. Welcome to part 2 of my episode on Z and Rise Up. If you missed part 1, please go back and check that out. In this podcast, Z talks about leaving the world of professional rollerblading to be with his new family here in the city. Once he made that adjustment, he enrolled in culinary school. When the pandemic hit, he and other friends from the industry were sharing what they were cooking, and just like some of us, several of them dove headfirst into bread making. Reluctantly, Z followed suit. When George Floyd was murdered by cops in the summer of 2020, it changed everything and gave birth to Rise Up. Here's Z.
Like a lot of time I got, whether it was a lot or not a lot, I got paid money to go off and represent companies, and in order to do that, it was like being gone.
Right. So you already had a family of your
Yes.
own?
Yeah,
okay.
And so when we had our first son, it was like, I don't really want to be gone, right? And and so then it was like, if I was gone, not only was I gone, I wasn't there to raise him. Mm-hmm. I also wasn't there to assist. Mm-hmm. So, it's a lot of like, I think your priorities just really change when you have children anyway.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So I was definitely like, this isn't working. I got to figure out who the new me is. Mm-hmm. And so then I started searching for him and trying to figure out what I could do and what I wanted to spend my time doing.
Okay.
And then I went to culinary school. And
where was that?
San Francisco Cooking School.
Yeah.
They were really, really good. Jody was the owner and head person there, and the moment I walked in, I was like, I have to be here. Like the way they did everything, the way they treated everyone was like really, really great.
Awesome.
And I put myself through culinary school because everything I had done up to that time, I'd kind of made up on the fly.
Right.
And so I didn't really know if I could cut it, right? Like,
okay. Because it's a different world from where you came.
Well, I mean, I'd worked in kitchens, but mm-hmm. the idea of like trying to be more than just, a line cook, right, or trying to be like, how to take that step to like maybe own my own space or mm-hmm. be a chef or, and I wanted to see if I went 8 hours a day, if this was something that I just romanticized or if this was something I could actually do. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I learned very quickly that I excelled at it and that I had a certain amount of imagination and a lot of hard work. So I felt very justified, like, oh, this was a good idea. And then I started working in kitchens and staging and working for people. Then I was kind of a...
Do you want to name drop?
Huh?
You were doing this here, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to name drop any places you worked?
I don't normally do all that.
Okay.
I normally, like, most of the stuff that I felt really comfortable doing was more working as a knife for hire. So, like, say you were going to feed 150 people in Sonoma or up in wine country, and you needed someone to come out and, like, run an open fire pit with, like, 50 chickens and, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like all the pre-prep that goes in, all that stuff, like showing up and working with previous chefs that I'd worked with and people that respected me and I respected them, and like showing up and kind of banging it out, because it takes a lot of people to do that kind of stuff. And so there's like known chefs and there's known places where you can like say, oh, I worked there, right? And by saying that, it's kind of like a name drop, right? And then there's all of the unsung heroes that no one really knows that was right there as well.
That do the work.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of some of the things that I learned in my time in restaurants is it takes a lot of people and not many of them get a lot of credit.
Right.
So that oftentimes there's like a divide, right? Like people that come in and do a bunch of work and then they go, and then there's the people that get the shine. And so I kind of didn't really like that part of it, and felt like if I was going to do my own thing, I wanted to do a little different.
Right.
And so now I do.
Probably we're like in the early tens now.
Yeah, I mean,
I know that's a lot of time, but like, anything that maybe kind of helps lead up to where you were when you...
There was that whole period of time was stay-at-home dad.
Coming back.
Yeah. Stay-at-home dad, and then after stay-at-home dad and Family Guy, there was kind of like going to culinary school and starting to work on that. And then there were several years of that, and then there was me being a private chef.
Okay.
So I went from being a knife for hire to doing a private chefing gigs, and started doing...
For yourself, like freelance? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would do like, if you wanted to have your, 40th birthday party with, 24 people at your house, 7-course meal, wine pairing, I would do those sorts of things.
Yes, I want to.
Yes. I don't do that anymore now. Now I wake up early and bake bread.
Right.
But yeah, and that's what I was doing when the pandemic started.
Okay.
And then it quickly turned into that didn't exist anymore.
Right.
And then it was just
hard to do that on Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. Hard to do that on Zoom. I had a bunch of things like, no refund policy on like, parties that I had planned, and then all of a sudden I just felt horrible. I'm like, everybody, here's your money back. No one's doing nothing. Let's just call it quits. What do they
call that? Force majeure, act of God?
Yeah, it was just like, I'm like, you didn't. I felt bad. You didn't get to have your birthday, and like, we might have spent 3 days coming up with a menu, and I might have had a bunch of stuff, but I'm like, I just felt bad for people. So
yeah.
So then I was at home making sure my kids were on their Zoom meetings for school.
So this would be like March, April, let's say, of 2020.
March, April.
Okay.
And then everybody started. I was a part of a kind of a foodie thread.
Okay.
Because most of the adults of the kids that were in our eldest son's class, like they were all either like restaurateurs or foodies just in general. So we started like sending pictures of menus and like recipes of things that we were making, just to kind of have some sense of community.
Yep. And
then inevitably it turned from like doing sous vide steaks and cauliflower pizza to all of a sudden everybody was making bread.
Yep.
And
that wasn't just us. I thought it was just us.
And I did not bake bread, and so I was kind of like, I'm good, pass, And then a lot of them were like, come on, like we're all doing it, like at least try. And I was kind of like, oh God, okay.
Yeah.
So I tried, and the flattest of flat little busted loaves. That I was just like, oh, these are booty.
Yeah.
And so then.
I mean, is that a version of like when you make pancakes? The first pancake is never.
Oh no, it's like that on steroids. It's like horrible. Yeah. And the truth is I mean, like, you can do all the things that you're supposed to do that it says in the book, and you are nowhere in the vicinity of where you need to be when it comes to making bread.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people have had a negative bread experience, and it only takes one or two before you're like, oh, I guess I can't do this.
Right.
And then it's just kind of like, I'm not going to do it.
Sink or swim, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
was this did you make that decision to, okay, well, I'll just make bread? And
I got mad.
Oh,
yeah.
I was going to say before or after George Floyd, because that was, if
this
memory
is
serves,
before.
May. So
this
you were
is before.
You were
Yeah.
already in.
I was in
dabbling,
the mix of making bread.
Okay.
And fighting against it and how come I couldn't get it right.
Right.
And so I started to have a little bit of success, where like I was starting to feel like I was starting to get it, and then all the stuff with George Floyd happened.
May 25th rings a bell.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then I felt a certain amount I felt a lot of anger, I felt a lot of sadness, and I felt a certain amount of shame because there were so many people that were going out to protest.
To demonstrate.
And I did not feel like I should go out and protest. I literally felt like if somebody says the wrong thing, I'm going to lose my shit. And so it was so close to home, and a lot of the way that I had been treated in my life, that I just was over it.
Right.
And so, I felt very powerless of like, I can't go out and join in, and shouldn't be, because I will detract from what the true meaning of this is. And so then I just kind of went inwards. I realized that I couldn't change the way the world saw me. I couldn't change a lot of those things. So I just am like, I just need to work on myself. And really, I just need to hold my stuff together, right? I didn't want to be crying every day in front of my kids. I didn't, so I also didn't want to fill their hearts and heads with all my anger. Right. So I would just kind of seclude myself and go and work on bread.
Okay.
And when I was working on bread, it was like the only thing that really gave me solace, where I was really happy. Right. And there's this thing, like, there's a certain zen to it, where just when you're down there for hours and everything else doesn't matter. And like you said earlier, like, I might be obsessive compulsive, like I might have a deep dive, whatever you want to call it. Well, the reality is when I was focused on that, wherever I would go in my brain was like a happy, healthy place. And it just kind of made things better for me. And then I realized that I wanted to share that.
What was that moment? Because so far it sounds like everything you're talking about that led you to developing and like really working on it was emotional and I would say mental.
Yeah.
But like, when did the heart come in as far as sharing with the world?
Well, we were really cut off from each other.
Right.
And so I was trying my best to stay connected. And so I started posting photos, and it went from, oh, I made a loaf too, and like, oh, it looks pretty good, to, can I buy that? I'll pay you to make me some.
Do you remember the first person?
Yeah, when I had a.
Who said that?
Yeah, I had a bunch. One of the first people was someone that I knew, because those were the only people that were following me, right? So someone I knew out in Brooklyn, and was like, "Hey, would you send me some bread?
Oh shit!
I'll pay you to send me bread."
Okay.
And I tried to say no like 15 times, like no,
Too
I'm
much.
not. This,
Yeah.
like, I have to go. I'm like, I don't want to go outside. I don't even know how to go and ship this stuff. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Everybody said, if you go outside, you're going to die.
Yep.
So I was kind of like, and he's like, man, just ship me the damn bread. And I'm going to pay for it. Just ship me the bread. I was like, okay. So right as I was packaging it up to ship it, I said, I can't believe people are paying me to send them bread. And the next day I woke up and I had 60 orders. Like, people were like, you're selling it? I'll buy it. And I was like, that's insane.
For us who don't work in restaurants, do you watch The Bear?
Yeah.
Was it like when they got the electronic,
all the tickets?
Phone?
Yeah,
was
exactly.
it like that? That was your moment.
Well, no.
I mean, that gives me so much anxiety, and I'm not there, and I've never done that work. It's like,
that happens later.
Okay.
So
60 orders was like
60 orders.
Whoa, but
it was 60 loaves.
Or 60 loaves.
60 loaves. And I was like, I don't even know how to do that. So then I was like, I'm gonna have to figure it out.
Right.
And so that started my mind into like, how do you do that?
Scale.
And do you do that? You know, do I do that? I can't do it in one day, and maybe I could do it in 5 days. How many can I do in a day? I can do 10 a day. Okay, well, that takes me 6 days. Well, okay, I mean, do I bring them in? Am I shipping them? Are they coming to pick them up? And it started all these problems / opportunities for me to figure stuff.
You're still just in your kitchen at home.
I'm still in my kitchen at home. Yeah, baking 4 at a time. And so then I started figuring out like how to do it, and well, if I do it every other day, and you know, I could do, you know, 10 a day every other day. It would take me to, and I used to think that like, you know, 30 in a week was a lot. Right. And then it started being like, well, you know, I have a little mixer. I could only make 4 at a time. And then someone saw what I was doing and said, hey, I got a mixer that's bigger, and then I could do 10 at a time. And then it was like, well, I can only bake 4 at a time. Well, if I have 2 racks, I can bake 8 at a time. And that sped things up. And then it was like, okay, well, I went online and I found old dilapidated convection ovens. And, you know, it's like, okay, for $500, the guy will come and hook it up for me. And so he brought it over and hooked it up.
At your home?
At my house.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I went from being able to do, you know, 10 a day to being able to do 12 an hour.
Wow.
And then 12 an hour to 24 an hour. And then and I went through all this, like, how to make it. And the way that it felt to me was like people were paying me how to learn how to do this.
Yeah, I mean, you're just keeping up with the demand.
Right.
Okay.
And then I started diversifying and doing different flavors, because I was like, well, I did some and I would just say, oh, I did this one for myself, and people were like, I want that. I'll try that.
What were some of those first?
The first ones was one I called the Ninth Ward, and it had Louisiana hot sausage in it. And so it was kind of like, what if you
I knew
did
I
like
should have eaten before I came to do this
pig in a
podcast.
blanket.
God damn, that sounds
good.
good.
And then I'm like, because Louisiana hot sausage is like my jam. So I was like, I wonder if I cut that in there, what would that do? And then I learned a bunch of things about that. And then I did one with fresh blackberries. And I learned a lot about how much you can put in and what that does and what does it do to the crumb and all the liquid that's released.
I was going to say, blackberries are very
wet.
Viscous or whatever. Yeah,
very
wet. They'll stay wet.
Well, I was just putting
and
them,
they stain, right?
Yeah, everything.
Everything, all right.
So, you know, and then I was just enjoying doing it. And I wasn't even really selling a lot of them, just in comparison to what I do now. It was just kind of like, you know, 30 a week and stuff like that. And then I started kind of like innovating and doing things that were different. And then people started taking notice. And then I had a food writer for the Chronicle, Lena. She came out and she bought a loaf and just talked to me on my stoop. And then she came back again, and when she came pick up, she said, do you mind if I talk to you? We can hang out. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll answer some questions. I didn't know she was a writer.
Oh.
Yeah. So she was just kind of like seeing what I was about. And then she started asking me, she's like, do you mind if I record this? And I was kind of like, well, that's a little weird. You know, I was like, and then she's like, no, I'm a writer. I'm like, oh, okay. So then she's like, I want to write an article. I'm going to pitch my editor on an article kind of about what you're doing. And I was like, okay. And, you know, I've done stuff enough to know that, you know, you can have a lot of good ideas. It doesn't always mean it's going to end up somewhere. Sometimes it hits the cutting room floor and never gets made. So I didn't have a lot of hopes or dreams or wishes about it. I just was kind of like, wow, it's really cool that someone thinks I'm worth talking about.
Was it already called Rise Up? Or
at that time it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the name speaks for itself. Do you want to talk about how you came up with that name? The name and the logo, I mean.
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, it was my way of, for me, it means like, you know, not going with the status quo, like standing up and rising up. And it also, at the time, I had taken my kids to go see Hamilton. And so there's a song in there, it's like, rise up, if you're living on your knees, you got to rise up. And at the time, there was a lot of just social unrest, and people were rising up. And I actually felt very seen at that point.
This is summer of 2020. Yeah.
There were just a lot of, like before, I felt like if there were problems, it was like if there was problems, it was like black people had to go die to like make changes. And for me, this was like really the first time that I saw all diaspora of human beings being like, fuck this, we're not going to take this no more, this is bullshit. And so,
and it's got the double there, the
yes,
whatever meaning of the
double entendre of rising up.
bread.
At the time that I was also trying to get my bread to rise and for me to feel good about it was at the exact same time that people were rising up in the streets. And so I felt like, this is kind of goes out in the power, and it is my, people have that that saying of like, like stand up against, like basically rise up. Don't let it resist, basically.
Right.
And the best way of resistance to me was proving to myself and to the world that would view me that whatever the stuff that you've been heaping on me and heaping on us about who we are and what we can be and what we're allowed to be is bullshit. And I'm going to do my best to reimagine what it should be or what I can be and what I can be to my community.
I'm just going to throw an amen in there.
All right.
I love it. I love it. I mean, I've watched your journey. I probably found you sometime that year, and let's share some of that.
Yeah.
As a business, you rose up. Like maybe what was the first store or restaurant or like, aside the first time you were selling not to like individual customers?
Well, so I didn't start selling like wholesale for a while. It was just direct to consumer, people coming to my front door. I figured out how to make that work first. And then, because when you sell to Rainbow Grocery, they need it at a certain time.
Right.
I also didn't really feel comfortable going to grocery stores and stuff because I wasn't really leaving my house. Right. So that was more in the like end of the first year into the second year.
Okay.
Started having people have their shots. Started being a little more
that changed things. I remember that.
Yeah, kind of like things start opening up a little bit. That's when I moved out of my house and into a facility that was bigger. That's when I could start hiring one or two people to help me do things. That allowed me to grow and scale a certain amount. Then because I could grow and scale, then I could kind of sell and deliver to, people, deliver to stores.
Because you had people back.
Right.
At the
right.
big,
I can't be in 5 places at once. So the first bit I would be in my spot, and then when people came in the afternoon to pick up their stuff, if there was 30 or 40 people and they were standing in line over 2 hours, I would just divvy out stuff, and then there was a certain amount of like community and people that were excited about following and they were excited to come and pick up and support. And so that did a lot for me during that period of time. And as when we started to get bigger, and Rainbow Grocery was the first grocery store we were in.
Okay.
And when they called me and said that they wanted me to be in it, like I hung up and I literally cried because I'm like, Rainbow Grocery? I'm like, oh my God, that's like so amazing. Like my mom used to take me there when I was a little kid.
Oh shit.
I was those little ratty kids that would jack one of the little apricot bars out of the
bulk.
Yeah, the bulk bars. We were sampling it, I swear.
As an adult, I love, and they have like easily the best bulk section. But when you're a kid, it's like easy
I was
access.
like, this is the
suckers.
Best. I would sneak away.
Hell yeah. So now all these years later, you're like they're asking me for my product to run in their store. Yeah.
And then I made collaborations and worked with people like Excelsior Coffee, and that's why I worked on developing the ube loaf specifically for them. Working with
there's a Filipino
area
connection, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ube area, who supplied me with the ube halaya when I first got started. They were friends of friends through them, and so they supplied me with it and allowed me. At first, like the way I was trying to do it, I didn't really understand how to do it, and then I started having to go down the rabbit hole and having some consults on like, well, how do you use it? What do you use it for? Like I knew I loved it and I knew I liked it, but trying to create something out of thin air, there's a reason why there's not a lot of ube sourdough, is because it's not easy to do.
Right.
And so oftentimes the things that I once I got over how to put things in, it was like, then it was a lot of the why, like
The story.
yeah, the story and the meaning and the validation of certain culinary things that might get overlooked, right? I say that when you put stuff into bread, they're called inclusions,
Right.
and so I really want to make sure that our inclusions are inclusive. So I want to make sure that it's like things that I think are beautiful, getting to be the person in the room coming up with the ideas who deem what's beautiful and what's worthy of time and energy. Like, I just have a different ideas because I'm influenced by different things, a lot of which are things that maybe aren't seen as financially viable, right? So you're like, well, if I'm making it for the audience and only 5% of the audience looks like this, why would I focus all this time and energy for like a subsect of a subsect? But I'm like, that's why.
Because
right? Like,
those people exist.
Right. And, well, and you,
those taste buds.
Yeah, you're excluding whole groups of people by not reflecting them in any way, right? And or validating their worth, right? So if I make a ube loaf, it says anyone who identifies with this, that they're inherently worth more because I care enough to make something that represents and shines light on something that I think is beautiful.
Right on.
If no one shines light and the only people that are doing it are like, we're important too, then it's like only for us, by us, where I think it should be, I think everyone should want to try Filipino food. I think everyone should want to try,
correct,
Indian food, especially in a place that has such a diaspora of mix of people. And I think we should validate it and raise it up.
I wanted to talk about the masala loaf because I got to have it when I kind of met you when my wife recorded you at the POC Food and Wine.
Yes.
God damn. That's good.
I worked on that with Lena.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like the source material, like collaborating, like finding the stuff, taking the inspiration, tweaking it. Like, it's really supposed to be like, kind of a punch in the mouth, right? Like, it's supposed to wake you up and make you go, why have I never seen anything like this before? Like, how did they come up with this, right?
Right.
I think a lot of times we've dumbed down things for people's palates because we don't want to offend them, which gives a lot of power to kind of like the middle, where I'm like, when I go to Thai food, I'm not trying to get Americanized Thai food. I'm like, I want to hit me fish sauce. I want the whole gambit, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then to me, that's how I show respect and love, right? Is I'm saying, like, all this stuff that you've spent all this time getting really good at, like, I see you, right? It's amazing. You're amazing, right? We'll go to a fancy French restaurant and we'll drop $250 and like, oh, I feel so important because I got to go to this place, right? But then we'll go to a Thai food restaurant, and if it's not cheap, you feel gypped. When I'm like, you know how hard it is to do what they do?
Right.
I'm like, why is it not
Why
elevated?
that gap?
Why is it only good if it's cheap?
Right.
And there's this weird thing that happens, a devaluation of black and brown folks, that I think it's kind of like my homie over here, he's got an amazing taco shop, right? And he got like death threats and people want him to go out of business because he raised his price on his famous burrito to $20 a pop.
Right.
I'm like, dude, that's like, I can't eat the whole thing.
That's the reality.
It's 2 different meals,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing. Birria tacos, and I'm like, so you're saying that him and everyone in there who all happens to be brown, they shouldn't be able to send their kids to college? They shouldn't be able to pay their rent? Right. You value them so little. The only reason you're there is because it's amazing and because it's cheap.
Right.
Like, you're just basically saying, if you're Mexican, you shouldn't be able to have what everyone else has. Like, you should be lucky that you're here. Just do my bidding so I can get over.
Serve me.
Yeah. And I can't stand it.
No,
it just drives me crazy. I'm like, I get to vote with my dollars, right?
Yeah.
When I invest, I feel like I'm a micro investor in your company. I keep showing up and spending the money that you tell me that it needs for me to enjoy your food, because I value you as a person and what you're trying to do. And anyone who's like, well, I shouldn't have to actually pay for that, I'm like, well, make your own stuff at home.
Right.
It's like, you can't do what they do, so you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh my God, this is the best meal I had, and it should be $2. Like,
and I'm just going to throw in also tip your servers, y'all, and your bartenders.
Yes. Especially in San Francisco.
Oh my God.
People are struggling out here.
We're running up against time. What I'd like to end on, every season on my show, I have a theme, and the season, you're going to be the, what do they call it, the penultimate or whatever. You're the next to last episode of this season coming up this summer. Every season I have a theme, and this season it is We're All In It. I want to know what that means to you. We've basically been talking about it the whole time, but like when you hear that phrase, We're All In It, what does that mean to you?
I love the phrase, We're All In It. We're all in it is exactly what I live for, which is community. I mean, like, to think that your struggle isn't my struggle, to think that we all are sharing this space and we're all building and trying to put our 2 cents in, like, it is 100% what this life is about, is we're all in together. None of us are getting out alive. We might as well make it the best we can make it. And you don't do that by yourself. You do that with others, you know, caring about others, showing up for others. And for me, that's a great representation. I'd wear that proudly on my sleeve.
That was Azikiwee Z. Anderson. The next episode of Storied San Francisco is the last bonus podcast of Season 6, when you'll meet Patrick Costello of the Anchor Brewery Union and hear what that group is up to these days now that the iconic San Francisco brewery has found a buyer. That drops next Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 6th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show, and drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Keep rejecting those silly doom loop narratives about our city. Stay wacky, weird, healthy, and creative. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.